The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored and heavy, with the kind of expensive paper that whispered old money and family traditions. I almost threw it away with the rest of the mail, bills, advertisements, and the usual detritus of modern life, but something about the elegant script of my name stopped me cold. Ms. Elena Vasquez. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Not Elena Martinez-Vasquez, the name I'd carried for 3 brief, tumultuous years. Not Elena Martinez, my maiden name that I'd reclaimed like a shield after the divorce. Just Elena Vasquez, as if those painful years had been erased with careful penmanship. My hands trembled as I opened it, and I had to read the invitation twice before the words sank in. The Whitmore family cordially invites you to join us for our annual summer reunion at Ashwood Estate, Martha's Vineyard. Saturday, July 15, 2023. Cocktails at 5 p.m., dinner at 7 p.m. We hope to see you there. At the bottom, in that same elegant script, please come, Elena. It would mean the world to have you there. Catherine Whitmore. I sank into my kitchen chair, the invitation fluttering to the table like a wounded bird. Catherine Whitmore, my former mother-in-law, the woman who had once promised me I'd always be family, who had held my hand through 2 miscarriages, who had stood silently by while her son destroyed our marriage with his lies and his affairs, the same woman who had written me a check for $2 million 18 months ago and asked me to disappear. Mama? I looked up to see my daughter Sophia standing in the doorway, her dark curls messy from her afternoon nap, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. At 4 years old, she had her father's piercing blue eyes and my stubborn chin, a combination that made my heart ache every time I looked at her. "What's wrong?" she asked, patting over on bare feet. "You look sad." I quickly tucked the invitation under a magazine, forcing a smile. "Nothing, Mija. Just some mail." I pulled her onto my lap, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "Did you have a good nap?" She nodded, then yawned. "Is Diego still sleeping?" "Yes, your brother is still resting. My 18-month-old son had been fighting a cold all week, and sleep was precious for all of us. Are you hungry? We could make some cookies." Sophia perked up immediately, the promise of sugar and flour enough to chase away any concerns about her mother's mysterious mail. As she chattered about what kind of cookies we should make, chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin or maybe both, I found myself staring at the magazine that hid the invitation. "Please come, Elena. It would mean the world to have you there." The irony was almost laughable. For 3 years, I'd been part of the Whitmore family, attending their elaborate gatherings, learning their traditions, trying desperately to fit into their world of old money and older secrets. I'd smiled through their subtle criticisms of my background. My father was a janitor, my mother cleaned houses, and pretended not to notice how they whispered about whether Marcus had married beneath him. Then came the miscarriages. 2 pregnancies. Lost in the first trimester, each one a devastating blow that Marcus seemed to shoulder with the stoic indifference of a man checking items off a to-do list. The family rallied around us, particularly Catherine, who shared stories of her own losses and promised that our time would come. What they didn't know, what Marcus didn't know, was that I had gotten pregnant again, just before I discovered his affair with his college girlfriend. While he was busy planning his exit strategy from our marriage, I was hiding morning sickness and making secret doctor's appointments, terrified to hope, terrified to tell him, terrified of everything. The divorce proceedings had been swift and brutal. Marcus wanted out, and the Whitmores wanted to protect the family name. I was offered a generous settlement in exchange for my silence about certain indiscretions. The family lawyers had been very thorough in their paperwork, ensuring that any future claims against the Whitmore estate would be legally impossible. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What they hadn't counted on was that I was already carrying their heir, and a spare twins. A boy and a girl. Diego Marcus Vasquez and Sophia Catherine Vasquez, named for my grandparents but carrying the DNA of one of America's oldest and wealthiest families. Children that Marcus had no idea existed, children that I'd been paid handsomely to keep secret. "Mama, you're squishing me," Sophia complained, wriggling in my lap. I loosened my grip, realizing I'd been holding her too tightly. "Sorry, baby. Let's go make those cookies." As we moved around the kitchen, measuring flour and cracking eggs, my mind wandered to the life I'd built in the 18 months since the divorce. I'd moved to Portland, Oregon, far from the Whitmore's Connecticut estate and their suffocating influence. With the divorce settlement and the additional $2 million Catherine had paid me for my discretion, I'd been able to buy a small house with a fenced yard and start over. I told people I was a widow when they asked about the children's father. It was easier than explaining the truth, and in many ways, it felt accurate. The Marcus I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd swept me off my feet with romantic gestures and promises of forever, had died long before our marriage ended. What remained was a stranger wearing his face, a man who could look me in the eye and lie about where he'd been, who he'd been with, what he was planning. Sophia was carefully dropping chocolate chips into the cookie dough when my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach lurch. Catherine Whitmore. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again immediately. And again. I have to take this, I told Sophia, stepping into the living room. Keep stirring, okay? She nodded solemnly, taking her cookie-making duties very seriously. I answered on the fourth call. Catherine. Elena, darling. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, cultured, warm, with just a hint of steel underneath. I was hoping you'd gotten my invitation. I did. And I walked to the window, looking out at the small garden I'd planted behind the house. Tomatoes and herbs, sunflowers for Sophia, a sandbox for Diego. Simple pleasures that the Whitmores would probably find quaint. And I'm not sure why you'd want me there. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Because your family, Elena. No matter what happened between you and Marcus, no matter how things ended, you'll always be family to me. The words hit harder than I'd expected. During those 3 years of marriage, Catherine had been more of a mother to me than my own mother, who died when I was 15. She'd taught me about wine and art, taken me shopping for appropriate clothes, included me in holiday traditions that stretched back generations. When the miscarriages happened, she'd been the one to hold me while I cried, the one to assure me that grief was love with nowhere to go. She'd also been the one to hand me that check and ask me to disappear from their lives forever. Things change, Catherine, I said finally. Some things do, she agreed. But not everything. Elena, I know this is complicated. I know there are hurt feelings, and I understand if you can't forgive us. But Marcus is announcing his engagement. At the reunion. To Jessica. Jessica Hartwell. The college girlfriend who'd never really gone away, who'd been lurking in the shadows of our marriage like a patient predator. Of course he was marrying her. Of course Catherine wanted me there to witness his happiness, to see how well he'd moved on, how little our marriage had meant in the grand scheme of his life. Congratulations, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Elena, I need to go. My cookies are burning. Please think about it, Catherine said quickly. The invitation is open. Come if you can, even if it's just for a few hours. It would mean, I hung up before she could finish. In the kitchen, Sophia was standing on her step stool, carefully placing spoonfuls of dough on the cookie sheet with the concentration of a surgeon. Who was that? She asked without looking up. Just someone I used to know. Did they make you sad again? I studied my daughter's face, wondering how much she understood, how much she sensed. Children were like sponges, absorbing emotions and tensions that adults thought they were hiding. A little, I admitted. But cookies make everything better, right? She grinned. Everything. As the cookies baked, filling the house with the warm scent of vanilla and chocolate, I found myself thinking about Catherine's words. You'll always be family to me, but she'd made her choice 18 months ago when she handed me that check. She'd chosen Marcus, chosen the family name, chosen the easier path. I understood it, even respected it, in a way. Mothers protect their children, even when their children are 35-year-old men who cheat on their wives. What she didn't understand was that I was a mother now too. And my children deserved better than being hidden like shameful secrets, better than a father who didn't even know they existed, better than a grandmother who'd paid to keep them invisible. That night, after Sophia and Diego were both asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and stared at the invitation. The Whitmore family reunion. 3 generations of American aristocracy gathering at their summer estate to celebrate their continued dominance, their unbroken legacy, their perfect bloodline. I thought about Marcus announcing his engagement to Jessica, about the toasts and congratulations, about how they'd probably mention his starter marriage to the Hispanic girl who hadn't worked out. I thought about Catherine playing the gracious hostess, about the extended family asking after me with fake concern before moving on to more interesting topics. I thought about my children sleeping upstairs, children who carried Whitmore blood in their veins but would grow up never knowing their heritage, never claiming their birthright, never understanding why their father was absent from their lives. And then I thought about something else entirely. I pulled out my laptop and began typing an email to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who'd helped me navigate the divorce proceedings and the subsequent non-disclosure agreements. If I was going to do this, if I was going to upend their perfect little world, I needed to understand exactly what legal ground I was standing on. The response came back within an hour. Patricia worked late, a trait I'd come to appreciate during the darkest days of my divorce. Elena, I've reviewed the NDAs and settlement documents. While you're bound by confidentiality regarding Marcus's infidelity and the family's financial affairs, there's no specific language preventing you from attending social events or acknowledging your children's existence. The payments made to you were characterized as voluntary compensation for discretion, not payment for permanent absence. Legally, you're free to live your life as you see fit, as long as you don't violate the specific terms outlined in the agreements. Let me know if you need clarification on anything else. Patricia, I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. Legally free. The words echoed in my mind as I closed the laptop and walked upstairs to check on my children. Diego was sprawled on his back in his crib, one arm flung over his head, his breath coming in the soft whispers of deep sleep. He looked exactly like Marcus had in the old baby photos I'd seen at the Whitmore estate, the same square jaw, the same thick dark hair, the same stubborn set to his mouth. Even in sleep, Sophia was curled on her side, her stuffed elephant tucked under her chin. She'd inherited my darker skin tone but Marcus's aristocratic features, a beautiful blend that would one day make men write poetry and women burn with envy. These were my children. My beautiful, brilliant, perfect children who deserved to know where they came from, who deserved to claim their place in the world, who deserved a father who acknowledged their existence. I went back downstairs and pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over Catherine's number for a long moment before I finally hit call. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. Elena? I'll come, I said simply. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Catherine's voice came through, thick with emotion. Really? Yes. I'll be there. Oh, Elena. I'm so glad. I'll have the guest cottage prepared for you, and I won't need the cottage, I interrupted. I won't be staying overnight. Of course. Whatever you're comfortable with. I took a deep breath, thinking of my children sleeping upstairs, thinking of the life I'd built, thinking of the truth that had been buried under money and legal documents and family shame. Catherine? Yes. I'm bringing guests. Another pause. Oh. Of course. A boyfriend. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. You could say that. 2 very special people I'd like the family to meet. That's wonderful, Elena. I can't wait to meet them. After we hung up, I poured myself another glass of wine and sat on my back porch, looking up at the stars. In 3 weeks, I would walk into the Whitmore family reunion with Diego and Sophia at my side. I would watch Marcus's face when he realized what he'd thrown away, what he'd never even known he'd lost. I would see Catherine's reaction when she met the grandchildren she'd paid me to hide, and I would finally stop running from the truth. The children deserved to know their family. The family deserved to know the children existed. And Marcus deserved to understand exactly what his choices had cost him. I pulled out my laptop again and began making a list. I'd need a babysitter for the long drive to Martha's Vineyard. I'd need to buy appropriate clothes for the children. The Whitmores would notice if Sophia showed up in a Target dress or Diego in hand-me-down shoes. I'd need to prepare myself for the storm that was coming, for the accusations and the anger, and the inevitable legal battles, but mostly, I'd need to prepare my children for the truth about their father, their grandmother, and the family that had been hidden from them since birth. 3 weeks, the countdown had begun. 3 days after my conversation with Catherine, I found myself standing in the children's section of Nordstrom, holding a tiny navy blazer that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Sophia was running her fingers along a row of smock dresses while Diego sat in his stroller, methodically destroying a package of goldfish crackers. "This one's pretty, Mama," Sophia said, pulling out a pale pink dress with intricate white embroidery. The price tag made me wince, but I nodded anyway. "Try it on, Mija." The saleswoman, a perfectly groomed blonde named Cindy, had been hovering nearby since we arrived. I could see her calculating our worth: my jeans and sneakers, Diego's stroller from Target, Sophia's animated chatter in both English and Spanish. She'd started attentive but had grown progressively cooler as it became clear we weren't her usual clientele. "Will you be paying with card today?" she asked as I added the blazer to our growing pile of clothes. "Cash," I said simply, watching her eyebrows rise. The truth was, I had more money than I knew what to do with. The divorce settlement had been generous, but Catherine's additional payment had set me up for life. I'd invested wisely, lived modestly, and tried to forget where the money had come from. But now, preparing for this reunion, I was finally going to put it to use. If I was going to walk into the Whitmore family gathering, my children would look like they belonged there. While Sophia tried on dress after dress, I found myself remembering the first time Marcus had taken me shopping. We'd been dating for 6 months, and he'd insisted I needed something appropriate for his mother's birthday party. I'd been hurt by the implication that my own clothes weren't good enough, but I'd let him guide me through Saks Fifth Avenue like a benevolent Pygmalion, selecting pieces that would help me fit into his world. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now doing the same thing for my children, preparing them to enter a world that should have been their birthright but instead felt like enemy territory. "Mama, look." Sophia emerged from the dressing room in the pink dress, spinning so the skirt flared around her legs. She looked like a fairy tale princess, all dark curls and bright eyes and innocent joy. "Beautiful," I whispered, my throat tight. "Do you think Daddy would like it?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Sophia had been asking about her father more frequently lately, especially since starting preschool, where most of her classmates had 2 parents. I'd maintained the widow story, but she was getting old enough to notice the inconsistencies: no photos of Daddy, no grave to visit, no relatives who shared his features. "I think any daddy would be lucky to have such a beautiful daughter," I said carefully. Later that evening, after we'd returned home with enough designer children's clothes to stock a small boutique, I called my sister Maria in Denver. "You're doing what?" she shrieked into the phone after I explained my plan. "I'm taking the kids to meet their father's family." "Elena, they paid you to stay away." "They paid you a lot to stay away." I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at Sophia's sandbox where she'd buried several of her toy dinosaurs earlier. "They paid me for my discretion about Marcus's affairs. There's nothing in the agreement that says I can't live my life." "This isn't living your life. This is," Maria paused, and I could hear her husband Roberto talking in the background. "This is revenge." "Maybe, Elena." Her voice softened. "I get it. I do. He hurt you, they all hurt you, and you want them to know what they lost. But think about Sophia and Diego. Think about what this could do to them." I had been thinking about them. I'd been thinking about how Sophia asked about her father with increasing frequency, how Diego would grow up with a hole in his identity that I'd helped create. I'd been thinking about the trust funds they should have, the educational opportunities they were being denied, the extended family they'd never know. "They deserve to know their father," I said. "And what if he doesn't want to know them?" That was the question that kept me awake at night. What if Marcus looked at these beautiful children and felt nothing? What if the Whitmore family saw them as a threat to be managed rather than grandchildren to be cherished? What if I was walking Sophia and Diego into a situation that would break their hearts? But then I thought about Catherine's voice on the phone, thick with emotion when I'd agreed to come. She'd wanted to see me, had reached out despite everything that had happened. Maybe, just maybe, she'd want to know her grandchildren too. "I have to try, Maria. I can't keep living this lie." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began researching the Whitmore family reunion. It was surprisingly easy to find information. The family had never been shy about their social events, and society photographers had been documenting their gatherings for decades. I scrolled through photos from previous years, studying faces and trying to remember names. There was Uncle Richard with his perpetually drunk wife Muffy. Cousin Jonathan, who'd inherited the family's banking interests and Marcus's tendency toward infidelity. Aunt Caroline, the family's token liberal who taught at Vassar and made everyone uncomfortable with her political opinions, and there, in photo after photo, was Marcus. My ex-husband looked exactly the same, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of effortless good looks that made waitresses stutter and valets hurry to open car doors. In the most recent photos, Jessica Hartwell hung on his arm like an expensive accessory, all blonde hair and perfect teeth and breeding that stretched back to the Mayflower. Looking at them together, I felt nothing. The jealousy and anger I'd expected were absent, replaced by something that felt almost like pity. They looked like actors playing roles, beautiful and polished and utterly empty. I closed the laptop and went upstairs to check on the children. Diego was sleeping peacefully, one thumb in his mouth, his other hand clutching a stuffed dog. Sophia was awake, staring at the ceiling with the serious expression she wore when she was thinking hard about something. "Mama," she whispered as I sat on the edge of her bed. "What is it, baby? Will you tell me about Daddy now?" My heart clenched. I'd known this moment would come eventually, but I'd hoped to have more time to prepare. "What do you want to know?" She rolled onto her side, studying my face in the dim light from the hallway. "Was he nice?" "Sometimes." It was the most honest answer I could give. "Did he love you?" "I thought he did." "Did he love me?" I stroked her hair, choosing my words carefully. "He never got to meet you, Mija. But if he had, he would have loved you so much." It wasn't exactly a lie. Marcus had wanted children desperately during our marriage. It was one of the few things we'd agreed on completely. He would have loved Sophia and Diego, I was sure of it. The question was whether his love would have been stronger than his fear of scandal, stronger than his family's expectations, stronger than his own selfish desires. "Are we going to meet him soon?" Sophia asked. I took a deep breath. "Maybe. We're going to a party where some of his family will be. Would you like that?" She nodded eagerly. "Will there be other kids there?" "Probably." I thought about Marcus's cousins, most of whom had children around Sophia's age. Children who would be her cousins, if she ever had the chance to know them. Will they like me? They'd be crazy not to. After Sophia fell asleep, I went back downstairs and made a list of everything I needed to do in the next 2.5 weeks. Buy clothes for myself. My wardrobe consisted mainly of yoga pants and sweaters, hardly appropriate for a Whitmore family gathering. Arrange for time off work from the nonprofit where I volunteered 3 days a week. Figure out how to explain 2 children to people who thought I'd never been able to carry a pregnancy to term, but first, I needed to call the one person who knew the whole truth. Dr. Sarah Kim had been my obstetrician throughout both pregnancies, the 2 I'd lost and the one I'd hidden. She'd been the one to confirm the twins, the one to help me navigate prenatal care while hiding my condition from Marcus, the one to deliver Diego and Sophia in a private room while their father celebrated his freedom 3,000 miles away. "Elena," she said warmly when she answered my call. "How are the twins?" "Growing like weeds. Diego's starting to talk more, and Sophia never stops asking questions." "Sounds normal. What can I do for you?" I explained about the reunion, about my decision to reveal the children's existence to their father's family. Dr. Kim listened without interruption, occasionally making soft sounds of understanding. "Elena," she said when I finished, "I have to ask, are you doing this for the children, or for yourself?" It was a fair question. "Both, I think." "That's honest. And probably healthy. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that this doesn't go the way you're hoping. The Whitmores might not welcome the children. They might see them as a threat or an inconvenience." "I know. Do you?" "Because it's one thing to intellectually understand that possibility, and another to watch your 4-year-old daughter get rejected by people who should love her." Dr. Kim's words stayed with me as I tried to fall asleep that night. She was right. I was potentially walking my children into a situation that could damage them emotionally. But keeping them hidden felt like damage too, a different kind of wound that would only deepen over time. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Sophia came downstairs with a fever and a cough, and by afternoon, Diego was showing the same symptoms. I spent the weekend playing nurse, monitoring temperatures and pushing fluids, all while trying not to panic about the reunion that was now just 2 weeks away. "Mama sick too?" Diego asked from his position on my lap, where he'd been camped out for most of Sunday afternoon. "No, baby. Mama's fine." But I wasn't fine. I was terrified and excited and angry and hopeful all at once, cycling through emotions like a broken kaleidoscope. I kept picking up my phone to call Catherine and cancel, then putting it down again. This was my chance, maybe my only chance, to give my children the family they deserved. On Monday, while the kids napped, I received an unexpected call from Patricia Chen. "Elena, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the reunion," she said without preamble. "Have you considered the legal implications of what you're planning? You said I was free to attend social events. You are. But if you reveal the children's parentage, it could complicate things. The Whitmores might argue that you're violating the spirit of your agreement, even if you're not technically violating the letter." I sank into my kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted. "Are you saying I shouldn't go?" "I'm saying you should be prepared for a fight. If I were the Whitmore family attorney, I'd be looking for ways to claim you violated your NDA the moment those children walk into that reunion." "What would happen then?" "Best case scenario? They demand the money back. Worst case? They try to claim fraud and pursue criminal charges." I hung up feeling sick to my stomach. I had enough money to repay Catherine's $2 million if necessary, but criminal charges? That could mean jail time, could mean losing custody of Diego and Sofia, but as I sat there spiraling into worst-case scenarios, I remembered something else Patricia had told me 18 months ago: the best defense is a good offense. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to a journalist named Rebecca Torres who worked for the Washington Post. I'd followed her work for years. She specialized in exposing the dirty secrets of America's elite families, the kind of investigative reporting that made powerful people very nervous. Ms. Torres, I have a story that might interest you about the Whitmore family of Connecticut. I'm willing to go on the record about certain events involving hidden children, secret payments, and NDAs used to cover up family scandals. Would you be interested in discussing this further? Best regards, Elena Vasquez. I stared at the email for 10 minutes before hitting send. If the Whitmores wanted to play hardball, I was ready to play back. The difference was that I had nothing left to lose, while they had everything. The response came back within an hour. Ms. Vasquez, I'm very interested in speaking with you. Can we arrange a call this week? I'm particularly interested in any documentation you might have regarding the payments and NDAs you mentioned. Best, Rebecca Torres. I scheduled the call for Thursday, after the children's doctor appointment, to confirm they were over their illness. If I was going to do this, really do this, I needed all my ammunition ready. Over the next few days, I began preparing in earnest. I had the children's birth certificates notarized, along with DNA test results I'd secretly obtained months earlier. I gathered photos from my pregnancy and from the twins' early months. I compiled emails from Catherine expressing concern about my well-being after the divorce, carrying messages that would demonstrate her emotional investment in my life. Most importantly, I began preparing Sofia and Diego for what was coming. "We're going to a very special party," I told Sofia as we drove to her preschool on Wednesday morning. "What kind of party?" "A family party. There will be lots of people there, and some of them might look like you and Diego." Sofia's eyes lit up. "Really? People who look like us?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Some of them have your eyes. And Diego's chin. Are they our family?" "They might be." That afternoon, while Diego napped, I showed Sofia photos of the Whitmore estate that I'd found online. The sprawling mansion with its manicured gardens and tennis court, the boathouse where Marcus had proposed to me on a perfect summer evening that now felt like it had happened to someone else. "It's like a castle," Sofia breathed, tracing the outline of the house with her finger. "A little bit. Do we get to live there?" "No, baby. We just get to visit." But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. If Marcus acknowledged the children, if the family welcomed them, would there be summers at the estate? Would Sofia learn to sail in the same waters where her father had spent his childhood? Would Diego grow up with the confidence that came from knowing exactly where he belonged in the world, or would this weekend destroy any chance of that future forever? Thursday's call with Rebecca Torres went better than I'd hoped. She was professional but warm, asking probing questions without making me feel like I was being interrogated. When I mentioned the $2 million payment, I could hear her typing furiously. "Elena, this is exactly the kind of story I've been hoping to tell," she said. "The use of NDAs to silence women and hide family secrets, It's an epidemic among wealthy families. What would you need from me? Everything you're willing to share. Documents, photos, recordings if you have them. And I'd want to attend the reunion if possible. I hadn't considered having a journalist present, but the idea had merit. If the Whitmores tried to silence me or threaten me, having a reporter witness their behavior could be invaluable. I'll think about it, I told her. Elena? Whatever happens. At that reunion, make sure you're recording it. Audio, video, whatever you can manage. These people are used to operating in shadows. The best way to beat them is to drag everything into the light. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside Diego's daycare, watching other parents pick up their children. Normal families living normal lives, unburdened by secrets and NDAs and the weight of hidden truths, but my children weren't normal. They were Whitmores, whether the family acknowledged it or not. They had a right to know where they came from. Who they were, what they were entitled to claim. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Catherine, looking forward to seeing everyone on Saturday. I'll be arriving around 4 p.m. with my guests. Her response came back immediately, wonderful. I can't wait to meet them. Drive safely. 1 week left. I picked up Diego from daycare and drove home, my mind already racing ahead to Saturday. In 7 days, I would walk into the Whitmore family reunion with my children at my side and watch their carefully constructed world implode. The only question was whether I was strong enough to handle the aftermath. The week leading up to the reunion crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that tightened throughout the day. Sophia seemed to sense my anxiety. She'd started having nightmares about monsters under her bed, and Diego had become clingy, refusing to let me out of his sight for more than a few minutes. On Tuesday, I received a package that made my hands shake as I opened it. Inside were professional photographs I'd commissioned of the children, portrait-style shots that would look at home in any society magazine. Sophia in her new pink dress, Diego in his tiny blazer, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren advertisement, but it was the family photo that took my breath away. All three of us together, the children on either side of me, their faces bright with laughter as they looked up at their mother. We looked like a complete family unit, happy and whole and beautiful. I stared at that photo for a long time, thinking about how it would look displayed in Catherine's sitting room alongside the other family portraits. Would Marcus see the resemblance immediately? Would he count backwards and realize the timeline? Would he understand what he'd lost? Mama, why are you crying? Sophia appeared at my elbow, concern creasing her little face. I'm not crying, Mija. Just thinking. She studied the photographs scattered across the kitchen table. We look fancy. You always look fancy to me. That afternoon, while the children napped, I drove to a storage unit across town where I kept boxes of things from my marriage, photo albums, wedding gifts, documents I hadn't been able to throw away but couldn't bear to look at. I hadn't been here since moving to Portland, but I needed something specific. I found it in the third box I opened, Marcus's medical records from a physical he'd had shortly before our wedding. I'd kept them because our insurance had required documentation of pre-existing conditions, but now they served a different purpose. The blood type listing, the genetic markers, everything I'd need to prove paternity if anyone questioned it, not that anyone would need to question it. Diego was a carbon copy of Marcus's baby photos, down to the stubborn cowlick that refused to lay flat. Sophia had inherited her father's distinctive eyes and the Whitmore family's aristocratic bone structure. One look would be enough to convince anyone with eyes that these children belonged to that bloodline. On Wednesday evening, my mother-in-law's sister called. I almost didn't answer. Aunt Helen had always been the family's designated spy, gathering information and reporting back to Catherine like some kind of geriatric CIA operative. Elena, darling, she gushed when I picked up. Catherine mentioned. You're coming to the reunion. How wonderful. It should be interesting. And you're bringing guests? A new beau, perhaps. I could hear the fishing expedition in her voice. Helen was probably calling from Catherine's sitting room with the whole family listening in on speakerphone. Something like that, I said vaguely. Well, I can't wait to meet him. Or them. Catherine wasn't entirely clear about the details. I prefer to keep some things private. After I hung up, I realized my hands were trembling. The family was already buzzing with curiosity about my mysterious guests. Good. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. In 3 days, they'd have all the answers they could handle. Thursday brought an unexpected visit from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, no relation to my lawyer, despite the shared surname. She was a retired pediatric nurse who'd become something of a surrogate grandmother to Sophia and Diego, often watching them when I had errands to run. "You seem tense lately," she observed as we watched the children play in the backyard. "Everything okay?" I'd grown close to Mrs. Chen over the past year and a half, but I'd never told her the truth about the children's father. Like everyone else, she believed I was a widow trying to rebuild her life. "Just some family drama," I said carefully. "The worst kind." She patted my arm with a weathered hand. "Whatever it is, those babies need their mama to be strong. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Her words stayed with me as I put the children to bed that night. Sophia had been asking more questions about the upcoming party, and I'd been trying to prepare her without revealing too much. "Mama, will Daddy be at the party?" she asked as I tucked her in. My heart stopped. "Why would you ask that? You said there would be people who look like us. And you said Daddy never got to meet us. So maybe he'll be there?" The hope in her voice nearly broke me. How could I explain that her father might be there but might not want to see her? How could I prepare a 4-year-old for the possibility of rejection from the man whose DNA she carried? "Maybe," I whispered. "But if he is, you need to know that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings. It doesn't mean anything about how wonderful you are." On Friday morning, I took the children for their final preparations, haircuts at an upscale salon where Sophia was pampered like a little princess and Diego charmed everyone with his babbled commentary on the experience. As I watched them in the salon chairs, looking like miniature aristocrats, I felt a fierce surge of protective love. These were my children. My beautiful, perfect children who deserved every advantage in the world. And if the Whitmore family couldn't see that, it was their loss. That afternoon, I received a call from Rebecca Torres. "Elena, I've been doing some research on the Whitmore family," she said without preamble. "Did you know that Marcus's engagement to Jessica Hartwell is being announced this weekend specifically because of some business merger between their families?" "What kind of merger?" "Hartwell Industries is acquiring a significant stake in Whitmore Banking. The marriage isn't just personal, it's corporate strategy." I sank into my kitchen chair as the implications hit me. Marcus wasn't just announcing his engagement at the reunion, he was sealing a business deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My appearance with his secret children wouldn't just disrupt a family gathering, it could derail a major financial transaction. "Elena? You still there?" "Yes, I'm here." "This changes things. If you're going through with this, you need to understand that the stakes are much higher than family drama. These people will do anything to protect that deal." After we hung up, I called Patricia Chen. "Elena, I was hoping you'd reconsider," my lawyer said when I explained Rebecca's discovery. "I can't. It's too late to back out now." "Then you need to be prepared for them to come at you with everything they have. Corporate lawyers, private investigators, maybe even attempts to have you declared an unfit mother. They can try. They can do more than try. These people have resources you can't imagine." That evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching Sophia chase fireflies in the gathering dusk while Diego slept on my lap. This peaceful life I'd built, this simple, happy existence, was about to be shattered by my own choice, but some things were worth fighting for. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Catherine's name appeared on the screen, and I almost declined the call. But something made me answer. "Elena, I hope I'm not calling too late." "It's fine. I just wanted to confirm that you'll be here tomorrow. Marcus is so excited to see you." Again. I nearly laughed at the lie. Marcus had no idea I was coming. Catherine was clearly trying to manage the situation, to control the narrative before it began. "I'm sure he is. And your guests, should I prepare anything special?" "I want them to feel welcome. Just themselves, Catherine. They'll want to be themselves." There was a pause. "Elena, is everything all right? You sound different." "A lot has changed since we last saw each other." "Yes, I suppose it has. Well, I should let you get some rest. It's a long drive from Portland." After we hung up, I realized that Catherine was nervous too. She'd invited me on impulse, maybe feeling guilty about how things had ended, but now she was second-guessing herself. Did she suspect something? Had she put together any pieces of the puzzle? It didn't matter. Tomorrow, all the pieces would be laid out for everyone to see. I carried Diego inside and tucked him into his crib, then found Sophia still in the backyard, sitting in her sandbox with her knees drawn up to her chest. "What are you doing, baby?" "Thinking about tomorrow." She looked up at me with those piercing blue eyes, Marcus's eyes. "Mama, what if the people at the party don't like us?" I sat down beside her in the sand, not caring about my clean clothes. "Then we'll know they're not very smart people." "But what if they're mean to us?" "Then we'll leave. We don't have to stay anywhere we're not wanted." "But you want them to want us, don't you?" Sometimes the perceptiveness of children was startling. "Yes, I do." "Why?" How could I explain it to her? How could I tell a 4-year-old that I wanted her to have a father who acknowledged her existence, grandparents who celebrated her birthday, cousins who would be her lifelong friends? How could I explain that I wanted her to grow up knowing exactly where she belonged in the world? "Because you're wonderful," I said simply. "And everyone should get to see how wonderful you are." That night, after both children were finally asleep, I packed our bags for the trip. The designer clothes hung carefully in garment bags, looking like costumes for a play I wasn't sure I knew how to perform. I added the photographs, the medical records, and a folder of legal documents that might become important depending on how things went. At the bottom of my suitcase, I placed a small recording device Rebecca Torres had recommended. If things went badly, if the Whitmores tried to threaten or intimidate me, I wanted everything documented. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined different scenarios for how the reunion might unfold. Marcus's shock and anger, Catherine's tears, the children's confusion as adults argued around them, the whole family closing ranks to protect themselves from the scandal. But I also imagined other possibilities. Marcus looking at Sophia and Diego with wonder, realizing what he'd missed. Catherine embracing her grandchildren with joy. The family welcoming us, making room for us, accepting us as we were. At 6 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make coffee. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, but I could feel the weight of the day ahead pressing down on me like a physical thing. This was it. Today, everything would change. I was loading our bags into the car when Sophia appeared at my elbow, already dressed in her travel clothes, a simple sundress that would be comfortable for the drive, with her fancy dress hanging in a garment bag. For later. "Is it time to go to the party?" "Almost. We need to wake up your brother and eat some breakfast first." "Mama?" She tugged on my shirt. "Whatever happens today, I'm glad we're together." I knelt down and pulled her into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Me too, baby. Me too." An hour later, we were on the road. Diego dozed in his car seat while Sophia chattered about everything she saw out the window: horses in fields, interesting cloud formations, trucks carrying cars to dealerships. Normal childhood observations that somehow felt precious because I knew this was the last day of our old life. Everything after today would be different. Better or worse, I couldn't say, but different. As we drove through the rolling hills of Vermont, I found myself thinking about the first time Marcus had taken me to meet his family. I'd been so nervous, so desperate to make a good impression. I'd practiced conversation topics and worried about my accent and researched proper etiquette for formal dinners. Now I was returning to that same house with the ultimate trump card, the next generation of the Whitmore bloodline. Children who carried their DNA but bore my last name, who spoke Spanish as fluently as English, who knew nothing about trust funds and boarding schools and the careful preservation of old money. "Mama, I'm hungry," Diego announced from the back seat. As we crossed into Massachusetts. "We'll stop for lunch soon." I found a family restaurant in a small town outside Boston, the kind of place with crayons on the tables and a children's menu featuring chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. As I watched my children color and giggle over their food, I tried to memorize this moment, the last time it would be just the three of us, uncomplicated by family drama and legal battles and the weight of revealed secrets. "After lunch, we're going to put on our fancy clothes," I told them as we got back in the car. "Why?" Sophia asked. "Because the people at the party will be dressed up, and we want to look like we belong." But even as I said it, I wondered if we ever really would belong in the Whitmore world. Maybe the best I could hope for was to make them understand what they'd lost, what they'd thrown away, what they'd paid me to hide. The drive to Martha's Vineyard involved a ferry ride that delighted both children. They pressed their faces against the windows, watching seagulls wheel overhead and pointing out boats in the distance. For a moment, I could imagine a different version of this trip, one where Marcus was with us, where we were heading to a family reunion as a complete unit, where the children were arriving to see grandparents who had been part of their lives since birth, but that version of events would have required a different version of Marcus, one who hadn't cheated and lied and walked away from his marriage. Without looking back, as the ferry docked and I saw the familiar outline of Martha's Vineyard ahead of us, my heart began to race. Somewhere on this island, Marcus was probably getting ready for his engagement announcement, blissfully unaware that his past was about to collide with his present in the most dramatic way possible. "Are we almost there?" Sophia asked as we drove off the ferry. "Almost." The roads were exactly as I remembered, narrow and winding, lined with the kind of expensive casual elegance that only old money could achieve. Every house we passed looked like it belonged on the cover of Architectural Digest, all weathered shingles and manicured gardens and BMW SUVs in circular driveways, and then, around a curve that I remembered like muscle memory, there it was, the Whitmore estate. Ashwood, they called it, though there were more oaks than ash trees on the sprawling property. The main house rose from the landscape like something out of a fairy tale, all gabled roofs and ivy-covered walls and windows that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Cars were already filling the circular drive, Mercedes and BMWs and a few older Bentleys that probably belonged to the most senior family members. I could see people in the distance, moving around the gardens in small groups, drinks in hand, the picture of elegant leisure. This was it. No turning back now. I pulled into a parking space between a Jaguar and a Tesla, my modest Honda looking distinctly out of place among the luxury vehicles. In the back seat, both children had gone quiet, staring up at the massive house with wide eyes. "It really is like a castle," Sophia whispered. "Remember what we talked about," I said, turning to face them. "We're here to meet some people, and some of them might look familiar to you. But no matter what happens, you two are the most important thing in the world to me. Okay?" They nodded solemnly, sensing the gravity of the moment even if they didn't fully understand it. I took a deep breath and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a navy blue dress that was elegant but not ostentatious, pearls that had been my grandmother's, shoes that were comfortable enough to chase children in if necessary. I looked like a successful woman returning to visit old friends, not like someone carrying enough explosive secrets to destroy a family. "Ready?" I asked the children. "Ready," Sophia said firmly. Diego just nodded, his thumb creeping toward his mouth the way it did when he was nervous. I got out of the car and began the process of extracting 2 children and all our belongings. The garment bags, the diaper bag, my purse with its hidden recording device. As I struggled with the logistics, I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. "Elena? Is that really you?" I turned around and came face to face with Marcus's cousin Jonathan, a martini already in his hand despite the early hour. He looked exactly the same, prematurely gray hair that probably cost more to maintain than most people's rent, clothes that whispered money without shouting it, the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about anything more serious than his golf handicap. "Hello, Jonathan." His eyes flicked to the children, who were standing beside me like small soldiers in their travel clothes. I saw him taking in their features, the obvious resemblance to family members, the expensive cut of their outfits. "And who are these lovely children?" he asked, but his voice had changed. There was a sharpness to it, a wariness that hadn't been there moments before. I put my hands on Sophia and Diego's shoulders, feeling their warmth and solidity, drawing strength from their presence. "These are my children," I said clearly. "Sophia and Diego." Jonathan's martini stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes darted between the children's faces and mine, and I could see the exact moment when recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Elena," he said slowly, "what exactly are you doing here?" Before I could answer, another voice cut through the air. A voice I hadn't heard in 18 months but would recognize anywhere. "Elena? What the hell?" Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of the house, his face white with shock. Behind him, I could see other family members beginning to gather, drawn by the commotion. And there, in the center of the group, was Catherine, my former mother-in-law, grandmother to my children, the woman who had paid me to disappear. Her eyes moved from my face to Sophia's, then to Diego's, and I watched as understanding dawned. across her aristocratic features, then she collapsed. The next 30 seconds felt like they stretched across an eternity. Catherine's elegant frame crumpled to the flagstone entryway like a marionette with severed strings, her champagne flute shattering against the stone with a crystalline crash that seemed to echo across the estate. Marcus lunged forward to catch her, but he was too late. She hit the ground with a sickening thud that made my stomach lurch. "Mother!" Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his face pale with panic. "Someone call 911. The gathering crowd erupted into chaos. Uncle Richard pushed through the assembled family members, his medical training from decades ago kicking in as he checked Catherine's pulse. Aunt Caroline began barking orders at the household staff. Cousin Jennifer was frantically dialing on her phone, her voice shrill as she spoke to emergency dispatchers, and through it all, Sophia and Diego stood pressed against my legs, their small hands clutching my dress as they stared wide-eyed at the commotion they'd inadvertently caused. "Mama," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos. "Did we make the lady fall down?" Before I could answer, Marcus's head snapped up, and his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. For a moment, time seemed suspended between us, the space of a heartbeat where recognition, shock, and something that might have been anguish flickered across his features. Then his gaze dropped to the children, and I watched his face transform. Diego, ever the social butterfly despite his young age, had started to toddle toward the commotion with the fearless curiosity of an 18-month-old. As he moved into the afternoon sunlight, every detail of his appearance seemed to crystallize in perfect, damning clarity: the stubborn cowlick that Marcus had struggled with his entire childhood, the distinctive Whitmore cleft chin, the way he carried his left shoulder slightly higher than his right, just like his father. Marcus's mouth fell open, and for a moment he looked like he might collapse beside his mother. "Jesus Christ," Jonathan breathed, his martini forgotten as he stared at Diego. "Jesus fucking Christ, Elena." "Language," I said sharply, instinctively protecting my children from the ugliness that was about to unfold. Uncle Richard looked up from where he was tending to Catherine, his weathered face creased with confusion. "She's coming around, but we should still have her checked by a doctor." "What the hell happened?" "She just looked at." His words died as his gaze fell on the children, and I watched the same recognition dawn across his features. Catherine's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on the concerned faces hovering above her. "I'm all right," she murmured, struggling to sit up. I need a moment." "Mother, please stay down until the paramedics arrive," Marcus said, but his attention kept drifting back to Sophia and Diego. I could see him cataloging their features, comparing them to family photos he'd grown up seeing, trying to process what his eyes were telling him. "Marcus," Catherine's voice was stronger now, though she remained seated on the ground. "Help me up." "You should wait, help me up." There was steel in her tone now, the voice of a woman who'd spent 70 years commanding rooms full of powerful men. Marcus and Uncle Richard exchanged glances before carefully lifting her to her feet. Catherine smoothed her silk blouse and adjusted her pearl necklace, every inch the composed matriarch despite her dramatic collapse moments before. But when she looked at me, I could see tears gathering in her cornflower blue eyes, the same eyes that Sophia had inherited. "Elena," she said softly. "We need to talk. All of us." The crowd of family members and staff began to disperse as Catherine waved off the approaching ambulance crew, insisting she was fine despite their protests. I watched Marcus hover anxiously at his mother's elbow, torn between concern for her health and the growing realization of what my presence meant. "Perhaps we should move this inside," suggested Aunt Caroline, ever the diplomat. "Away from prying eyes." She was right. I could see neighbors, staff and delivery drivers slowing down as they passed the estate, drawn by the unusual commotion. The last thing the Whitmore family needed was gossip spreading about the dramatic scene unfolding on their doorstep. "The study," Catherine decided. "Elena, would you and your children join us?" The hesitation before the word children spoke volumes. She couldn't bring herself to say grandchildren, not yet, not until she knew for certain what she was dealing with. As we moved toward the house, I felt Sophia's hand slip into mine. "Mama, I don't like this place," she whispered. "Can we go home now?" "Not yet, baby. We need to talk to these people first." The Whitmore estate was exactly as I remembered it, all gleaming hardwood floors and priceless antiques, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors watching from ornate frames. But being here with my children felt surreal, like I was viewing a movie set of my former life. The study was Catherine's domain, lined with first edition books and family photographs spanning generations. As we filed in, I noticed Marcus positioning himself between me and his mother, as if he could somehow protect her from whatever revelation was coming. "Mrs. Chen, would you mind watching the children for a moment?" Catherine asked the housekeeper who'd appeared in the doorway. "No." The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "They stay with me." Catherine looked surprised by my tone. During our marriage, I'd been deferential to her wishes, eager to please and fit in. That woman was gone. "Of course," she said after a pause. "Perhaps they'd like some juice? Mrs. Chen makes wonderful fresh lemonade." Sophia perked up at the mention of lemonade, but Diego had grown cranky from the long car ride and the strange environment. He pressed closer to my legs, whimpering softly. "He's tired," I explained, lifting him into my arms. "It's been a long day." As I settled Diego on my hip, I caught Marcus staring at us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Longing? Regret? Fear? Maybe all three. "Elena," Catherine began, settling herself carefully into the wingback chair behind her antique desk. "These children, they're how old?" "Sophia is 4. Diego is 18 months. I watched her do the math, counting backwards to the approximate conception dates. Her face went pale again, but she remained composed. "And their father?" "I think you know the answer to that." Marcus finally found his voice. "This is impossible. Elena, we lost." He couldn't finish the sentence. "I lost 2 pregnancies during our marriage," I said quietly. "I was pregnant a 3rd time. You just didn't know about it." The silence in the room was deafening. Through the tall windows, I could hear the distant sounds of the reunion continuing. On the lawn, laughter and conversation and the clink of glasses. Normal people having a normal family gathering, blissfully unaware that their world was imploding just a few yards away. "You're saying these children are?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Your children. Our children." He sank into the nearest chair as if his legs could no longer support him. "But the divorce papers, the timeline, you would have been pregnant during your affair with Jessica?" "Yes." Catherine's hand flew to her throat. "Elena, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell Marcus?" I looked at her incredulously. "Tell him what, exactly? That while he was planning to leave me for another woman, I was carrying his children? Tell him so he could pressure me to terminate the pregnancy? So he could use them as bargaining chips in the divorce? He would never, he would have done whatever was expedient." I cut her off. "Just like you did when you paid me to disappear." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes moving between his mother and me. "What is she talking about?" he demanded. Catherine's composure finally cracked. "Marcus, we thought it was for the best. What payment?" His voice was dangerously quiet. I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of the bank transfer records. $2 million, paid 6 months after our divorce was finalized. In exchange for my discretion about family matters and my agreement to maintain my distance. Marcus stared at the documents, his face cycling through confusion, understanding, and finally rage. "Mother, what the hell did you do?" "I protected this family." Catherine's voice rose to match his. "Elena was devastated by the divorce, and we thought it would be easier for everyone if she could start fresh somewhere else." "You paid her to leave?" "We paid her to heal." But even Catherine didn't sound convinced by her own words. Sophia, who had been quietly sipping her lemonade in a child-sized chair, suddenly spoke up. "Mama, why is everyone yelling?" The innocent question cut through the adult drama like a knife. All eyes turned to her, and I watched Marcus's expression soften as he really looked at his daughter for the first time. She was beautiful, there was no denying that. Her dark curls caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and her blue eyes, his eyes, were bright with curiosity despite the tense atmosphere. "We're not yelling, sweetheart," I said gently. "We're just having a grown-up conversation." "About us?" Sophia was nothing if not perceptive. "About family," I admitted. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, his gaze fixed on Sophia. "What's your favorite color?" he asked suddenly. Sophia brightened at the unexpected question. "Purple. And yellow." And sometimes green if it's like grass green, not yucky green. A ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's face. Those are good colors. What's your favorite color? She asked in return. Blue, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Like your eyes. The moment was interrupted by a soft knock on the study door. Mrs. Chen peered in apologetically. I'm sorry to disturb, but there are several family members asking about Mrs. Whitmore. Should I tell them she's indisposed? Catherine straightened in her chair, the matriarch reasserting herself. Tell them. I'm fine, but that I'm handling a private family matter. The reunion should continue as planned. After Mrs. Chen left, Catherine turned back to me with a look of steely determination. Elena, I need to ask you directly. Are you here for money? Because if this is some kind of extortion, I don't want your money, I said flatly. I never wanted your money. I took it because I was pregnant and scared and alone, and it seemed like the only way to ensure my children would be provided for. Then what do you want? I looked around the room, at Marcus, who was still staring at Sophia with wonder and confusion, at Catherine, who was trying to maintain control of a situation that had already spiraled beyond her influence, at my children, who were caught in the middle of a drama they were too young to understand. I want them to know their father, I said finally. I want them to know their family. I want them to have what they deserve, not just money, but belonging. Identity. A place in the world that goes beyond what I can give them alone. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between Sophia and Diego. They don't even know who I am, he said softly. No. I told them their father died before they were born. It seemed kinder than the truth. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. And now? Now I'm tired of lying. Catherine cleared her throat. Elena, you must understand the position this puts us in. Marcus is announcing his engagement tonight. There are business considerations, family obligations, business considerations. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your son has 2 children he's never met, and you're worried about business. I'm worried about everyone involved, Catherine said firmly. Including these children. Do you really think disrupting their lives with this revelation is in their best interest? Disrupting their lives? Catherine, they're Whitmores. They're heirs to one of the oldest fortunes in America. They have cousins and aunts and uncles who could love them, guide them, give them opportunities one never could. And instead, they're being raised by a single mother in Portland, Oregon, because you decided it was more convenient to pretend they don't exist. That's not fair, Marcus said quietly. Fair? I turned on him, all the anger and hurt I'd been suppressing for 2 years. Finally bubbling to the surface. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been having a husband who didn't cheat. Fair would have been having a father for my children who wanted to be there. Fair would have been not having to choose between my pride and my children's financial security. I never wanted to hurt you, Marcus said, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he sounded like the man I'd once loved. But you did. You hurt me so badly that I couldn't even tell you I was carrying your children. That's how little trust was left between us. Silence fell over the room again. Outside, I could hear the party continuing, music and laughter and the sounds of a family celebrating together. Everything my children should have been part of from birth. What happens now? Catherine asked finally. I adjusted Diego on my lap, feeling his weight and warmth, drawing strength from his presence. That depends on Marcus. All eyes turned to him. He was staring at the children with an expression of naked longing, and I found myself remembering why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. When Marcus Whitmore focused his attention on something he wanted, he was irresistible. I want to know them, he said finally. I want to be their father. Even though it means telling Jessica about them? Even though it means explaining to your business partners why you have secret children? Even though it means admitting that you're perfect. Family image is a lie. He met my eyes directly for the first time since I'd arrived. Yes. Catherine looked stricken. Marcus, think about what you're saying. The merger with Hartwell Industries, fuck the merger, Marcus said quietly, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. These are my children. Sophia giggled at the bad word, covering her mouth with her small hands. You said a naughty word. Marcus smiled, really smiled, for the first time since I'd walked back into his life. I did. Sorry about that. It's okay. Mama says naughty words sometimes too when she thinks I can't hear. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Marcus actually laughed. Does she now? Uh-huh. When she burns dinner or when the car won't start. She says, Sophia, I interrupted quickly. Maybe we should keep Mama's naughty words private. The easy banter between father and daughter felt both natural and surreal. This was what I dreamed of during those long, lonely months after their birth, Marcus falling in love with his children, wanting to be part of their lives, choosing them over everything else, but it was also what I'd feared. Because now that I'd opened this door, I couldn't control what happened next. Elena, Catherine said, her voice carefully controlled. If Marcus wants to acknowledge the children, we'll need to discuss arrangements. Custody, visitation, financial support. They don't need your financial support, I said sharply. I've done just fine providing for them. But they deserve more than just fine, Marcus said quietly. They deserve everything I can give them. Including a stepmother who doesn't know they exist. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Through the window, I could see figures moving on the lawn, and I realized that Jessica Hartwell was probably somewhere among them, blissfully unaware that her perfect engagement announcement was about to be derailed by two children she'd never imagined existed. Marcus closed his eyes, and I could see him wrestling with the impossible choice I'd forced him to make. His future with Jessica, with all its financial and social advantages, or his past with me and the children he'd never known he'd lost. When he opened his eyes again, there was a new resolve in them that made my heart skip. I need to talk to Jessica, he said simply, and I realized that everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. The door to our old life had just slammed shut forever. Marcus stood up with the sudden determination of a man who'd finally found his backbone after years of letting others make his decisions. I need to find Jessica. Now. Marcus, wait. Catherine's voice carried a note of desperation. Perhaps we should think this through more carefully. The ramifications are mine to deal with, he cut her off, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard him use with his mother. These are my children, Mother. My responsibility. My choice. I watched this new version of Marcus with a mixture of admiration and wariness. During our marriage, he'd been perpetually torn between what he wanted and what his family expected, usually choosing the path of least resistance. But something about seeing Sophia and Diego had awakened something fierce in him. Where are you? Going to find her? I asked. She's staying in the guest house with her parents. They arrived this morning for the announcement. Marcus paused at the study door, his hand on the brass handle. Elena, will you wait for me? Please? The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. We're not going anywhere. After he left, the study felt cavernous and oppressive. Catherine sat behind her desk like a general surveying a battlefield after a devastating defeat, while I tried to keep Sophia and Diego entertained in the increasingly tense atmosphere. Mrs. Whitmore, I said finally, breaking the uncomfortable silence. I know this isn't how you wanted things to go. Catherine's laugh was bitter. That's quite an understatement. But they're good children. If you gave them a chance, it's not about the children, she interrupted. It's about timing. Marcus is supposed to announce his engagement in 3 hours. The Hartwell family has flown in from California. We have board members here, business partners, journalists from the society pages. This was supposed to be a celebration of two families joining together, not a revelation that would complicate everything. Catherine's silence was answer enough. Sophia had discovered a chess set on one of the side tables and was arranging the pieces according to some internal logic that involved making the horses face each other. Diego had grown fussy in the unfamiliar environment and was clinging to my dress, his thumb firmly planted in his mouth. They look just like him, Catherine said suddenly, her voice soft with wonder. Sophia has his eyes, and Diego. She trailed off, staring at my son. He has Marcus's baby pictures to life. I know. Why didn't you tell me? When you found out you were pregnant, why didn't you call? I shifted Diego to my other hip, considering my words carefully. Because by then, I'd already caught him with Jessica. I knew he was planning to leave me. I was terrified, Catherine. Terrified that if I told him about the pregnancy, he'd pressure me to end it. Terrified that if I told you, you'd find a way to take the children from me. I would never, wouldn't you? Your son was leaving me for a woman whose family could strengthen your business empire. I was just the inconvenient first wife who'd served her purpose. Another pregnancy that might not even survive to term? I wasn't going to give anyone the chance to make that decision for me. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the polished wood of her desk. When Marcus filed for divorce, I was relieved, she admitted finally. I know. You weren't what we'd envisioned. For him. Your background, your family's financial situation. It wasn't what we'd hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Her honesty stung, even though I'd known it all along. But you made him happy. For a while, at least. And you were trying so hard to fit in, to be the wife he needed. When the miscarriages happened. Catherine's voice broke slightly. I saw how much you were hurting. How much you both were hurting. And yet you paid me to disappear. I thought I was helping. You seemed so lost after the divorce, so broken. I thought the money would give you a chance to start over, to heal. While conveniently keeping me away from your family. Catherine didn't deny it. Yes. Outside, I could hear raised voices from the direction of the guest house. The sound carried across the manicured lawn, and I realized that Marcus had found Jessica. Even from this distance, her voice was unmistakably shrill with indignation. Uh-oh, Sophia said, looking up from her chess horses. Someone's having a fight. Catherine moved to the window, her face pale. Perhaps we should. The study door burst open with enough force to rattle the frame. Jessica Hartwell stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, her blonde hair disheveled and her perfectly applied makeup smudged with tears. Behind her, Marcus looked like he'd been through a war. Where are they? Jessica's voice cracked with fury and disbelief. Where are the children Marcus claims are his? I instinctively pulled Sophia closer while adjusting my grip on Diego. Jessica. Don't. You dare, Jessica, me. She stormed into the room, her Louboutin heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've destroyed? I've told the truth. The truth? Jessica's laugh was sharp and ugly. The truth is that you're a bitter, jealous woman who can't stand to see Marcus happy. So you've fabricated this elaborate lie. They're not fabricated, Marcus said quietly from the doorway. Jessica, I told you. One look at them and you can. See, I can see two children who could belong to anyone. Jessica whirled on him, her face flushed with rage. Just because they have dark hair doesn't mean they're yours, Marcus. She could have slept with anyone after your divorce. The implication hung in the air like poison. I felt my temper flare, but before I could respond, Catherine's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's enough. The matriarch's tone brooked no argument. Jessica, you're in my home. You will conduct yourself accordingly. Your home? Your home where you're entertaining this woman and her bastard children while my family is outside waiting for an engagement announcement that apparently isn't coming. Sophia's small hand tugged at my dress. Mama, what's a bastard? The innocent question seemed to deflate some of Jessica's rage, but not her venom. It's what people call children whose parents weren't married when they were born, sweetheart. Jessica. Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. I knelt down to Sophia's level, blocking her view of the adults glaring at each other above us. It's just a word some people use when they're angry. It doesn't mean anything important. But Sophia was too smart for simple explanations. But you and Daddy weren't married when I was born, right? Because Daddy died before I was born. The room went dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I struggled to navigate the minefield of questions my 4-year-old had just laid out. It's complicated, baby, I said finally. But if Daddy didn't die, and he's here now, then you weren't married when I was born, so that lady is right, isn't she? Sometimes the brutal logic of children was more devastating than any adult argument. I looked up to find Marcus staring at Sophia with an expression of pure anguish. Sophia, he said softly, would it be okay if I explained something to you? She studied his face with the serious concentration she usually reserved for complicated picture books. Are you my daddy? The question hung in the air like a prayer. Marcus knelt down beside me, bringing himself to Sophia's eye level. Up close, the resemblance between them was even more striking, the same blue eyes, the same stubborn set to their chins, the same way of tilting their heads when they were thinking. Yes, he whispered. I think I am. Sophia considered this for a moment. Then why did Mama say you were dead? Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes they think things are one way when they're really another way. Your mama thought I wasn't going to be part of your life, so she thought it would be easier if you believed I wasn't here anymore. But you are here. Yes, I am. And I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. Jessica made a sound of disgust. This is ridiculous. Marcus, you're talking to a child who's been coached to. Nobody coached her, I said sharply, rising to my feet. She's 4 years old. She doesn't understand the complexities of adult relationships or business mergers or any of the other reasons you think this is inconvenient. Inconvenient? Jessica's voice climbed toward hysteria. Inconvenient? Marcus, we're supposed to announce our engagement in 2 hours. My parents flew across the country for this. Your business partners are here. The merger papers are being signed next week. Then we'll postpone the announcement, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off Sophia. Postpone? Marcus, you can't be serious. You can't throw away everything we've planned, everything we've worked for, because of some woman's dubious claims about, they're not dubious. Marcus finally looked at Jessica, and I could see the exact moment their relationship died. Look at them, Jessica. Really look at them. Diego has the same cowlick I had as a baby. Sophia has my mother's eyes. They're mine. Even if they are. Jessica said desperately, it doesn't have to change anything. We can arrange for child support, visitation on weekends. Elena doesn't have to be part of our lives. They are part of my life, Marcus said firmly. They're my children. And I'm supposed to be your wife. We're supposed to build a life together, not deal with the complications from your previous mistakes. The word mistakes hit the room like a physical blow. I saw Marcus flinch, saw Catherine's face harden, saw Sophia's expression crumple with confusion. Mama, Sophia whispered, why does the pretty lady think I'm a mistake? Before I could answer, Diego started to cry, the tired, overwhelmed wail of an 18-month-old who'd had enough of strange places and raised voices. His distress seemed to galvanize Marcus in a way that all the adult arguments hadn't. Hey, buddy, Marcus said softly, moving toward us. It's okay. Diego stopped crying and stared at this new person with the wide-eyed fascination that toddlers reserved for potential sources of entertainment. Marcus held out his hands tentatively. Can I hold him? I hesitated for a moment, then carefully transferred Diego to his father's arms. The sight of them together, Marcus's strong hands supporting his son's small body, Diego's curious fingers reaching up to explore his father's face, made my throat tight with emotion. He's beautiful, Marcus whispered, his voice thick. They both are. Jessica watched this tender moment with an expression of growing horror. Marcus, you can't do this. The merger depends on our marriage. If you back out now, then we'll find another way to structure the deal. There is no other way. The Hartwell board specifically wanted a family alliance. Without the marriage, they'll walk. Catherine finally spoke up from behind her desk. Jessica, perhaps this conversation would be better held privately, no. Jessica turned to face the matriarch with desperate fury. Mrs. Whitmore, surely you understand what's at stake here. The merger with Hartwell Industries represents the largest expansion in your company's history. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of jobs, the future of both families' legacies. I understand perfectly. Then make him see reason. These children, even if they are his, they don't have to disrupt everything. Elena can sign another agreement, accept whatever financial arrangement you offer, and go back to wherever she came from. Marcus can still marry me, the merger can proceed, and everyone gets what they want. The casual cruelty of Jessica's proposal took my breath away. She was talking about my children like they were inconvenient paperwork to be filed away, obstacles to be managed rather than human beings who deserved love and recognition. No. Marcus's voice was quiet but absolute. That's not happening. Marcus, I said no, Jessica. I won't pay Elena to disappear again. I won't abandon my children again. And I won't marry someone who thinks my son and daughter are mistakes. To be hidden. Jessica stared at him for a long moment, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. Then you're throwing away everything we built together. Everything we planned. We didn't build anything, Marcus said sadly. We just made plans that worked better on paper than they did in real life. The silence that followed was broken by Sophia's small voice. Daddy, are you going to marry the mean lady? Marcus looked down at his daughter, really looked at her, as if he was seeing her for the first time. "No, sweetheart. I'm not." Jessica let out a sound that was part sob, part scream of rage. "Fine. Fine. When this destroys both families, when the merger falls apart and Whitmore Banking loses everything, remember that you chose this. You chose her and her children over our future." She stormed toward the door, then turned back one last time. "And Marcus? Don't expect me to wait around while you play house with your newfound family. We're done. Completely." After she left, the study felt eerily quiet. Diego had fallen asleep in Marcus's arms, his small fist tangled in his father's shirt. Sophia was back to arranging her chess pieces, but I could see her stealing glances at Marcus every few seconds. Catherine was the first to break the silence. "Well," she said with forced lightness, "I suppose we'll need to make some announcements to our guests." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I suppose we will. The board members will need to be informed about the merger complications," Catherine continued, her voice taking on the crisp efficiency she used for crisis management. "And we'll need to contact the Hartwell family before they hear about this." From Jessica. "Mother," Marcus said quietly, "I know this complicates things." "Complicates things?" Catherine stood up from her desk, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked every one of her 70 years. "Marcus, you've just ended $100 million merger and destroyed a relationship with one of the most powerful families on the West Coast. Complicated doesn't begin to cover it. But you understand why I had to." "I understand that you're a father," Catherine said simply. "And that fathers protect their children, even when it costs them everything else." She walked over to where Marcus stood holding Diego, studying her sleeping grandson with wonder and something that might have been love. "May I?" she asked softly. Marcus carefully transferred Diego to his grandmother's arms. Catherine held him with the practiced ease of someone who'd raised children and helped raise grandchildren, but her face was soft with an emotion I'd never seen from her before. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your grandmother." Diego stirred but didn't wake, instinctively snuggling closer to the warmth of her embrace. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at him. "He has your father's nose," she told Marcus. "And your grandfather's hands. Long fingers. He'll probably be a pianist. Or a surgeon," Marcus suggested. "Or an artist. Or anything he wants to be," I said quietly. Catherine looked at me over Diego's sleeping form. "Elena, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually." "Catherine, no, let me say this. I was wrong to pay you to leave. I was wrong to assume that your absence would be better for everyone. And I was wrong to underestimate how much you loved my son, how much you deserved to be part of this family." Her words hit harder than I'd expected. "Thank you. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I nodded, bracing myself. "What do you want from us now? What do you want for Sophia and Diego?" I looked around the study, at Marcus holding Sophia on his lap while she showed him her chess arrangement, at Catherine cradling Diego with the tenderness of a woman discovering she was a grandmother, at the family photos lining the walls that would now need to include 2 new faces. "I want them to know they're loved," I said finally. "I want them to have a father who chooses them over everything else. I want them to grow up understanding where they come from and who they are. And I want them to have choices, the kind of choices that come with education and opportunity and financial security. And for yourself? I want to stop running. I want to stop hiding. I want to stop pretending that the last 2 years didn't happen." Catherine nodded slowly. "Then we have a lot of work to do." Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to slant through the windows at a lower angle, and I realized that the reunion was still going on. In a few hours, Marcus was supposed to have announced his engagement to Jessica. Instead, he was sitting in his mother's study, learning that he was a father to children he'd never imagined existed. The door to our old life hadn't just closed, it had been blown off its hinges, and somehow, despite everything, I was beginning to believe that might not be such a terrible thing after all. 3 hours later, I found myself standing on the terrace overlooking the Whitmore estate's manicured gardens, watching my children play with cousins they'd met for the first time that afternoon. The reunion had transformed from a celebration of Marcus's engagement into something entirely different, a homecoming for 2 children who'd never known they had a home to come to. After Jessica's dramatic exit, Catherine had taken charge with The military precision of a woman who'd spent decades managing family crises. She'd summoned the household staff, made discreet phone calls to key family members, and somehow managed to salvage what should have been a complete disaster. The children need to meet their family, she'd announced with finality. And the family needs to meet them. The introductions had been awkward at first. Uncle Richard had examined Diego with the clinical interest of a retired pediatrician, declaring him unmistakably a Whitmore, before launching into a detailed explanation of genetic inheritance that went completely over Sophia's head. Aunt Caroline had immediately begun grilling me about my parenting philosophy and Sophia's educational plans, while Cousin Jonathan had muttered something about damage control and legal implications, before being firmly shushed by his wife. But children, I'd learned, were remarkably adaptable. Within an hour, Sophia was racing around the gardens with Marcus's niece Emma, both of them shrieking with laughter as they chased the estate's ancient golden retriever. Diego had been passed from relative to relative like a precious artifact, charming everyone with his sleepy smiles and baby babble. Now, as evening approached, I watched Marcus crouched beside the ornamental pond, helping Sophia feed the koi fish while explaining their different colors and patterns. He'd shed his formal jacket hours ago, and his white shirt was grass-stained from crawling around the garden with his newly discovered children. He's good with them, Catherine said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. Natural. He always wanted children. During our marriage, it was one of the few things we never disagreed about. Catherine handed me a glass of the estate's finest Chardonnay, the same vintage she'd served at dinner parties where I'd felt like an imposter, trying to prove I belonged. Now it tasted different. Less like performance, more like acceptance. Elena, we need to discuss practical matters, Catherine said gently. Custody arrangements, schools, where the children will live, they live with me in Portland. That's not changing. I'm not suggesting it should. But Marcus will want to be involved now. And frankly, given his newfound paternal instincts, I suspect he'll want to be very involved. As if summoned by our conversation, Marcus appeared on the terrace, carrying a sleepy Diego while Sophia skipped alongside them. My son had grass in his hair and chocolate around his mouth from the ice cream Uncle Richard had smuggled him despite my protests about sugar before dinner. Someone's getting cranky, Marcus said, gently bouncing Diego. I think it might be time for a nap. The casual way he'd said, someone's getting cranky, like he'd been parenting Diego for years instead of hours, made my chest tight with emotion. During our marriage, Marcus had been theoretical about fatherhood, talking about future children in abstract terms. But watching him with Sophia and Diego, I could see he was already completely smitten. There's a nursery upstairs, Catherine offered. Mrs. Chen could, I'll take him, I said, reaching for Diego. But he clung to Marcus's shirt, making soft protesting sounds. I could come with you, Marcus suggested carefully. If that's okay? The last time Marcus and I had been alone together, he'd been handing me divorce papers and avoiding eye contact. Now he was asking permission to help put our son down for a nap. The surreal nature of the situation wasn't lost on either of us. The nursery Catherine had mentioned turned out to be a perfectly appointed child's room on the 2nd floor, complete with a crib, changing table, and walls painted with whimsical forest scenes. It was the kind of room wealthy grandparents kept for visiting grandchildren, except until today, Catherine hadn't known she had any. This is beautiful, I said, settling Diego on the changing table to clean the chocolate from his face. Mother had it decorated years ago, Marcus said quietly. After our 2nd miscarriage. She said she wanted to be ready, just in case. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Catherine had been preparing for grandchildren all along, had been hoping despite the heartbreak, had been waiting for children who'd been born but hidden from her. Diego submitted to being cleaned up with drowsy patience, then reached his arms toward Marcus with the confident expectation of a child who'd already decided this man was trustworthy. Hey, buddy, Marcus murmured, lifting him into his arms. Ready for sleep? As I watched Marcus gently rock our son, humming a lullaby I didn't recognize, I felt the careful walls I'd built around my heart begin to crack. This was what I'd dreamed of during those long, lonely nights after the children were born, Marcus. Holding them, loving them, being the father I'd always known he could be. Elena, Marcus said softly, not taking his eyes off Diego's increasingly heavy lids. I need you to know something. What? I would have chosen them. If you'd told me about the pregnancy, if you'd given me the chance, I would have chosen them. Over everything else. Even over Jessica? Especially over Jessica. He carefully placed Diego in the crib, covering him with a soft blanket. What Jessica and I had, it was never real. It was convenient, familiar, safe. What you and I had, was real, but it wasn't enough. Marcus turned to face me, and I could see the weight of regret in his eyes. It was enough. I was just too much of a coward to fight for it. And now? Now. I want to fight for them. For Sophia and Diego. For the chance to be their father. You are their father, Marcus. DNA doesn't require your permission. But being a real father does. Being present, being involved, being someone they can count on, that's a choice. And I'm choosing it, Elena. If you'll let me. The conversation was interrupted by Sophia's voice from the doorway. Is Diego sleeping? She'd changed out of her fancy dress into pajamas that Mrs. Chen had somehow procured, pink flannel covered in unicorns that made her look even younger than her 4 years. He is, I confirmed. And you should be getting ready for bed too, Mija. But I'm not tired. Sophia protested, though she was swaying slightly on her feet. And Daddy said he'd read me a story. The casual way she'd said, Daddy, made both Marcus and me freeze. We stared at each other over her head, neither of us sure how to handle this rapid acceptance of a relationship that had fundamentally changed our lives. If Mama says it's okay, Marcus said carefully. I looked at my daughter, our daughter, standing in the doorway of a nursery in her paternal grandmother's house, asking her father to read her a bedtime story like it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe, for her, it was. One story, I agreed. And then sleep. The next hour passed in a domestic tableau I'd never imagined possible. Marcus read Sophia 3 picture books from the nursery's well-stocked shelves while I sat in the rocking chair beside Diego's crib, listening to my ex-husband's voice weave tales of brave princesses and magical kingdoms. Sophia peppered the stories with questions and commentary, and Marcus answered each one with the patience of a man who discovered something he'd been missing his entire life. When Sophia finally fell asleep on the daybed Catherine had arranged for her, Marcus and I found ourselves alone for the first time since I'd arrived at the estate. This is surreal, I said quietly, careful not to wake the children. Good surreal or bad surreal? I'm not sure yet. Marcus moved to the window overlooking the garden, where the last guests were beginning to disperse. The reunion that was supposed to celebrate his engagement had instead become the day he'd met his children. The Hartwell family left an hour ago, he said. Jessica's father made some fairly dramatic threats about the consequences of backing out of the merger. Are you worried? I should be. The merger represented the biggest expansion in Whitmore banking's history. Without it, he shrugged. We'll find another way. We always do. And Jessica? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Jessica was never really mine, Elena. I realize that now. She was who I thought I should want, not who I actually wanted. And who do you actually want? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with 2 years of separation, pain, and carefully guarded hope. Marcus turned from the window to look at me, and I could see my own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. I want to be a father to Sophia and Diego, he said carefully. I want to be part of their lives, part of their daily routines, part of their growing up. I want to know their favorite foods and their bedtime songs and what makes them laugh. That's not what I asked. I know. He moved closer, but kept a careful distance between us. Elena, I know I have no right to ask this. I know I hurt you terribly, and I know trust is something that has to be earned. But I also want to be part of your life again. Not because of the children, though they're the most important thing now. But because somewhere in the mess I made of our marriage, I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. I stared at him, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Marcus, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe we could find a way to be a family. All 4 of us. Before I could respond, Catherine's voice called softly from the hallway. Elena? Marcus? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are some people downstairs who'd like to meet you. We found the living room filled with family members I'd expected to scatter after the day's revelations. Instead, they'd lingered, and I realized they were waiting to welcome Sophia and Diego, and by extension, me, into the fold properly. Uncle Richard stood up when we entered. Elena, I want to apologize for earlier. I was caught off guard by the day's events. But having had time to think about it, I want you to know that those children are Whitmore's, and Whitmore's take care of their own. Aunt Caroline nodded emphatically. Sophia is going to need proper educational guidance. I have contacts at the best preparatory schools, and when the time comes, she'll want to consider elite universities. Caroline, Catherine warned gently. What? The child has obvious intelligence. It would be a waste not to cultivate it properly. Cousin Jonathan, who'd seemed most concerned about the legal implications earlier, approached with an envelope. Elena, I've taken the liberty of having our family attorneys draft some preliminary custody and support agreements. Nothing formal. Just a starting point for discussions. I accepted the envelope but didn't open it. That's very thoughtful, but the children will want trust funds, of course, Uncle Richard interrupted. And we'll need to update the family estate planning documents. They're heirs now, whether they bear the Whitmore name or not. The casual discussion of million-dollar inheritances and elite educational opportunities made my head spin. These people were talking about restructuring their entire family legacy to accommodate 2 children they'd met 6 hours ago. It's a lot, Catherine said, reading my expression. But Elena, they're family now. That comes with responsibilities on both sides. What kind of responsibilities? Well, holidays together, of course. Family traditions they should learn about. Summer vacations here at the estate. And we'll want them to understand their heritage, their place in the family history. Marcus watched this planning session with amusement and something that looked like relief. They're not relocating the children, Mother. Elena will still be their primary parent. Of course not, Catherine said. But Portland is quite far from Connecticut. Perhaps Elena might consider relocating somewhere closer? We could help with housing, naturally. Naturally, I repeated faintly. The conversation continued around me, discussions of nannies and private schools and family traditions, while I tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. 6 hours ago, I'd been a single mother struggling to give my children the best life I could manage alone. Now I was being absorbed into one of America's wealthiest families, with all the privileges and complications that entailed. Elena, Marcus said quietly, appearing at my elbow. You look overwhelmed. Slightly. We can slow this down. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. Don't we? Tomorrow I go back to Portland, and you stay here, and we try to figure out how to co-parent children who live 3,000 miles apart. What if you didn't go back to Portland? I stared at him. What? What if you stayed? Not here at the estate, but nearby. There are beautiful properties in the area, wonderful schools for Sophia, plenty of space for the children to grow up knowing their family. Marcus, I know it's a lot to ask. I know you've built a life in Portland. But Elena, I meant what I said upstairs. I want to be part of their daily lives. I want to help with homework and go to school plays and teach Diego to throw a baseball. I can't do that from across the country. I looked around the room at the family that had spent years excluding me but was now eager to embrace my children. At Catherine, who was discussing art classes for Sophia with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd been denied grandchildren for too long. At Uncle Richard, who was already planning Diego's future medical career based on the boy's excellent fine motor development. What about Jessica? What about the merger? Jessica's gone. As for the merger, Marcus shrugged. Business deals come and go. Children only grow up once. And if I say no? If I decide to stay in Portland? Then I'll respect that decision. But I'll also fight for as much time with them as I can get. I'll visit every weekend, every holiday, every school break. I'll make the commute work somehow. The determination in his voice convinced me that he meant it. This wasn't the Marcus who'd walked away from our marriage without looking back. This was a man who'd discovered he was a father and was willing to rearrange his entire life around that revelation. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But even as I said it, I realized I was already thinking about what Marcus had proposed. Sophia had been asking about starting kindergarten next year, and the schools in Connecticut were undoubtedly better than anything I could afford in Portland. Diego would grow up with cousins and grandparents and the kind of extended family I'd never been able to give him. And Marcus would be there for bedtime stories and scraped knees and first days of school. He'd be the father I'd always hoped he could be but had never given him the chance to prove. 3 months later, I was unpacking boxes in a beautiful colonial house just 20 minutes from the Whitmore estate. The house came with its own history. It had belonged to Marcus's great-aunt until her death the previous year, but Catherine had insisted on having it completely renovated to my specifications. "Think of it as a welcome home gift," she'd said when she handed me the keys. Sophia had started kindergarten at the local elementary school, where she'd quickly made friends and charmed her teacher with her precocious vocabulary and artistic talent. Diego spent 3 days a week at Catherine's house, where she spoiled him shamelessly, and he repaid her devotion by taking his first steps in her garden. Marcus had been true to his word about wanting to be involved in their daily lives. He picked Sophia up from school twice a week, helped with her homework, and had become an expert at negotiating the complex politics of 4-year-old friendships. He changed Diego's diapers without complaint, learned to make the specific type of grilled cheese sandwich Sophia preferred, and somehow managed to maintain his banking career while becoming the kind of hands-on father I'd never dared to hope for. "Mama, Daddy's here," Sophia announced, running to the window as Marcus's car pulled into our driveway. The word still felt strange, but less so every day. Marcus appeared in the kitchen carrying a bag of groceries and wearing the slightly harried expression of a man who'd spent his lunch break shopping for organic milk and the specific brand of crackers Diego preferred. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing my cheek in greeting, a gesture that had evolved naturally over the months, carrying just enough familiarity to feel comfortable but not enough to presume anything. "Good." Sophia finger-painted a masterpiece, and Diego said "Dada" 17 times in a row. Very clearly. Marcus's face lit up. "Really? Where is he?" "Nap time. But he should be waking up soon." As if summoned by our conversation, Diego's babbling voice echoed from upstairs. Marcus was halfway to the stairs before I could blink. "I'll get him," he called over his shoulder. Sophia looked up from her coloring book. "Mama, is Daddy going to live here now?" It was a question she'd been asking with increasing frequency, and one I still didn't know how to answer. Marcus and I had been carefully rebuilding our relationship, taking things slowly for the children's sake and for our own. We were partners in parenting, friends who were rediscovering each other, two people trying to figure out if the love that had brought us together the first time was strong enough to survive everything that had driven us apart. "Would you like that?" I asked. "Yes. Then we'd be a real family." "We're already a real family, Mija. Just a different kind of family than some other people have." But even as I said it, I knew what Sophia meant. We were a family that lived in 2 houses, that coordinated schedules and shared holidays and navigated the complex dynamics of parents who loved each other but weren't quite ready to admit it. Marcus returned with Diego, who was babbling happily and reaching for me with chubby arms. The 4 of us settled in the living room for our usual after-school routine, Sophia showing off her artwork while Diego played with blocks and Marcus and I caught up on the day's events. It was domestic and peaceful, and exactly what I'd dreamed of during those long, lonely months when I thought I'd never see Marcus again. But it was also temporary, bounded by the careful agreements we'd made about custody and visitation and the mutual understanding that we were taking things one day at a time. "Elena," Marcus said as Sophia headed upstairs to wash her hands before dinner, "I wanted to talk to you about something." "What?" He was quiet for a moment, watching Diego stack blocks with intense concentration. "I got a call from Jessica today." My stomach dropped. "Oh? She's engaged. To someone from her father's company. The wedding's in 6 months. How do you feel about that?" "Relieved," Marcus said honestly. "And grateful that she's moved on. But also, it made me think about what I want for the future." "What do you want?" Marcus set Diego's blocks aside and turned to face me fully. "I want this. Every day. I want to come home to you and Sophia and Diego. I want to help with homework and bedtime stories and all the ordinary moments that make up a life together." "Marcus, I know we agreed to take things slowly. I know we're still figuring out how to trust each other again. But Elena, I'm tired of living in 2 houses. I'm tired of scheduled visits and careful boundaries. I want to be a family. A real family," the way Sophia said. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you think there's a chance for us. Not just as co-parents, but as partners." As people who love each other and want to build a life together. I looked at this man who'd broken my heart and then put it back together again, who'd walked away from a merger worth hundreds of millions of dollars to read bedtime stories to children he'd just met, who'd spent the last 3 months proving every day that he meant what he'd said about fighting for our family. I think, I said carefully, that there's more than a chance. Marcus's smile was radiant. Really? Really? But Marcus, if we do this, if we try again, it has to be different this time. No secrets, no half-truths, no putting business obligations ahead of family. I understand. And if it doesn't work out, if we discover that we're better as co-parents than as a couple, we have to promise that it won't affect our relationship with the children. It will work out, Marcus said with quiet confidence. How can you be so sure? Because this time, I know what I'm fighting for. 6 months later, on a perfect spring afternoon, Marcus and I were married in the garden of the Whitmore estate. Sophia served as our flower girl, scattering rose petals with the serious concentration she brought to all important tasks, while Diego toddled between guests in his tiny tuxedo, charming everyone with his infectious giggles. Catherine had insisted on hosting the reception, and the entire extended family had gathered to celebrate not just our marriage but the completion of a journey that had begun with secrets and ended with truth. Are you happy, Mama? Sophia asked as we watched Marcus dance with Diego, spinning him around while he shrieked with delight. Very happy, Mija. Good. Because Daddy's happy too. I can tell. She was right. Marcus was happier than I'd ever seen him, relaxed, confident, completely at peace with the life we'd built together. The merger with Hartwell Industries had eventually fallen through, but Whitmore Banking had found other opportunities, other partnerships that didn't require sacrificing family for business. Jessica had married her businessman 6 months earlier, in a ceremony that received extensive coverage in society magazines. I'd seen the photos, elegant, perfectly orchestrated, everything my simple garden wedding wasn't. But looking at those images, I'd felt only gratitude that Marcus had chosen love over logistics, family over finance, the messy reality of our life over the perfect facade of his previous plans. Elena, Catherine appeared at my elbow, carrying a glass of champagne and wearing an expression of contentment I'd rarely seen on her face. Thank you. For what? For bringing them home. For giving Marcus the chance to be the father I always knew he could be. For making our family complete. I looked around at the celebration surrounding us, Uncle Richard teaching Sophia to waltz, Aunt Caroline engaged in serious conversation with Diego about his future educational prospects, Marcus's cousins playing an elaborate game of tag that had somehow encompassed half the garden. This was what I'd wanted when I'd driven to Martha's Vineyard 18 months ago with my children and my secrets and my desperate hope that family was stronger than fear. Not revenge, not vindication, but belonging. The chance for Sophia and Diego to grow up knowing exactly where they came from and who they were. Thank you for letting us come home, I said to Catherine. This was always your home, dear. We just took a while to realize it. As the sun set over the Whitmore estate, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt Marcus's arms slip around my waist from behind. He smelled like sunshine and happiness and the faint scent of Diego's baby shampoo. No regrets, he murmured against my ear. I leaned back against his chest, watching our children play with their cousins in the gathering twilight, surrounded by family who loved them and claimed them and would spend the rest of their lives making sure they knew they belonged. None at all, I said, and for the first time in years, that was completely true. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.